Hello and welcome to another episode of the Young Tongues. I'm just going to do that again because I seem to be frozen.
Yeah, you look frozen to me too.
Yeah, quality check. I'm good. Oh, here we go. Right, I can always cut this bit. Right, there we go. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Young Tongues podcast. My name is Barbara and I'm the founder and CEO of the Young Tongues, a global peer support group for young tongue cancer patients. Now, I always say that I have a special guest on the show today, but today I have a really, really special guest because she's also my friend and I'm so happy to have you, Molly. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi.
Hi. So just before we start, I just want to let everyone know who's listening in that today we are going to be talking about recurrences and we are going to be talking about chronic cancer. And chronic cancer basically means that the cancer diagnosis is no longer curable. So nonetheless, I invite you to stay here for the ride because Molly is absolutely awesome. But to give everyone else a chance to get to know you, Molly, can you introduce yourself like beyond the cancer diagnosis?
Yeah, so I live in Kansas City, Missouri in the US, and I'm married to my lovely husband, Brad. We've been together since we were like 16, so he's my best friend and my like adventure partner, and we love to be outside like hiking and camping and sailing and traveling, and we just like to live a full busy life. And I'm a veterinarian. I work in emergency medicine and surgery. I opened a little oncology ward in our hospital these last couple of years and do chemotherapy with our patients too. And then of course we've talked about before, I've gotten to travel with my work and work with sled dogs in Alaska and Norway, and then I also teach veterinary anatomy at the tech school. So that's kind of a little bit about how I spend my time.
A very, very busy life, which is
Yeah.
amazing. I always love it. Following, being connected on social media and stuff, I always love your posts. So I
Yeah.
guess if we go back in time to how we first met, when did you first realise something wasn't right, and what was let's say the first chapter of tongue cancer for you, Molly?
Yeah, so in 2020, I was 29 and I just had a small ulcer on the side of my tongue that wouldn't heal. It was on the left side, right where it rubbed against my molars. And that was during COVID, so it was hard to get into the dentist to get it checked out and then subsequently to get it biopsied. And long of the short of it, it was squamous cell carcinoma. And so in that fall of 2020, I had a partial glossectomy and a neck dissection and a PET scan. And the PET scan was clear and the neck dissection was clear. I think they took like 14 lymph nodes and a salivary gland, and everything came back negative. And they kind of shaved off the left like side of my tongue, and the tumor spot itself was like less than a centimeter. It was like 4 millimeters wide and like 5 millimeters deep or something. And it was HPV negative and negative for perineural like involvement
And good
and
margins.
great margins. So there was no need for radiation. Like it was honestly like the best possible outcome. And I continue to follow up with my surgeons every 3 months for the next 3 years, and everything was fine. And then I had my first metastatic tumor almost 3 years to the date for my first surgery. And then that one was like under my tongue, and like these muscles that connect your chin to your larynx. And we tried surgery to see if we could take that out, because obvious for all the reasons, surgery is always like the first thing that they try. And that was another blow, waking up from surgery. They basically extended my neck dissection like ear to ear and just like pulled everything up and dissected down. And the tumor was wrapped around all the nerves that innervate your throat essentially, so they couldn't operate on it without totally killing all this. So they stopped. So I woke up from surgery being told that it was not effective.
Yeah.
And that sucked.
Yeah. Now, just before
Yeah.
we rush forward, I'm just going to rewind a
Yeah.
little bit, because we obviously met in that in-between stage, that after your first diagnosis, and you pretty much returned to life as normal, I can say, a bit like me.
Oh,
And you were also, I need to mention, you were one of our OGs. You came to our first ever call, and I always felt really connected to you, because I was like, oh, there's someone else who only, in inverted commas, had surgery. And we met in New York at our meetup, so we also had that personal connection. But it was really much like, oh wow, Molly's like me. And I think one of the things that I think we both believed at the time, with Young Tongues being quite new and only having like a limited network, is the thing that we're all told is that early diagnosis gives you the best possible outcome, and the earlier you find it, the less invasive the treatment. So we both didn't have radiation, and on top of that, the further out you come from surgery, the less likely you're going to have it again. So I have really vivid memories of you telling us 3 years after the surgery of it's back. Now, I don't know, technically speaking, do you know, was it back or was it always there? Did they ever explain that to you?
Yes. So the current thinking is, because that was the first metastatic tumor that we found. We have since found more. It was under my tongue, under my lymph nodes. That idea, and they don't know this for sure, but the leading theory is that when you're diagnosed originally, there's a concern that it's spreading and metastasizing, which it's now clear that it was. Just none of the mets were detectable at the time of that original surgery. So they basically kind of go into like a frozen, like dormant state in your immune system. And statistically, within the first 2 years, it's typically when they become most evident. And that's when that's when they talk about recurrence is the highest. But mine was never recurrence of the original tumor. My tongue, my mouth, like, has been fine and cured since surgery. So, and my mets since then have been outside of the zone of radiation. So even if I would have done radiation at the time of the original diagnosis, like, I was in the 2% that it had already metastasized throughout my body. It just wasn't, none of them were big enough to be detectable at the time of that original surgery. So I was stage 1 based off of what
they could see
at the time. But that's the thing about metastatic disease and oral squamous cell carcinoma, is I think statistically like 98% of stage 1 patients are like stage 1, and local recurrence and then subsequent metastasis is a concern. For myself, I was a occult stage 4 at diagnosis. It had already spread everywhere. There was no evidence of it. And I think that was also part of why it was hard to get to find it when the Mets happened, because they weren't looking there. Because for all intents and purposes, if it was to recur, it's supposed to recur
in the local area. Yes.
Yeah. I didn't have any indication that there would be metastatic disease, because there was no evidence of Mets at the time of diagnosis. So that's the part that's particularly unlucky for my case, it would seem.
Yeah. In your checkups in between,
oh, for sure.
Every did they 3 months. Did they do scans?
That's how we caught it. Yeah. So
okay.
that's how we caught the Met. Like, we were doing scans, and I had some lymphedema, and we were like, well, let's go ahead and do another scan. And then that's when they found that first Met under my tongue. So it's not from a lack of scans, it's not from a lack of follow-up. And that's something I get kind of emotional about, because just like when we were originally diagnosed, you find yourself saying, look, it's nothing I did wrong. It's not because I was smoking. It's not because of a lifestyle thing. It was just bad luck. I find myself saying the same thing like this time, it's not from a lack of follow-up, it's not from a lack of scans, it's not from bad doctors, it's not from, oh, I didn't do radiation, it's not from any of those things. It's just bad luck.
Just bad
And
luck. Yeah.
like,
It's just
so like, I mean, it's the same scenario reoccur, like for my reoccurrence. And that's where, when I talk to people about anxiety, about recurrence, like obviously I know what that feels like. I've been there, like for 3 years, like I was in that boat too. But like the reality is like it didn't matter. Like all the anxiety I had or didn't have, like it was always
going to happen that way, because there wasn't anything else they could have done. And when they when they found it underneath your tongue, you didn't have any symptoms, did you? If I remember. So it was just the scan. Now see, that's really interesting to me, because I live in a very different system where we don't do any scans. So
well, and I've looked into that research a little bit about what's the value in these follow-up scans if the patient doesn't have clinical symptoms, because the idea is if it's already met outside, if like monitor locally for reoccurrence, and like we can see that. And then so the scans are really to detect metastatic disease. And the problem is with metastatic disease is that then it's like your goals change, and it's like it's not curative, it's to address your clinical signs of pain and discomfort. So if you're not having any pain and discomfort, then like what's the point of doing the scans? Because even if it was there and we saw it earlier, like it doesn't change the outcome, because your treatment recommendations are based off of your symptoms, and if you're not having any symptoms, and it kind of becomes okay. So I do understand it to some degree. Like, I mean, obviously every patient's different, and that's when I came in with lymphedema. That's why we decided, well, let's go ahead and push up that scan, because like now you have a clinical symptom that's different than before, and that's, and there, ergo we found it. And so, and similarly then with my next set of tumors popped up, like I was advocating for scans because I was having pain and more lymphedema, and so ironically, we did scans and they still missed it because they weren't looking in the right spot. So there is a false sense of security with scans. I really feel like it's more of, you know your body best, and scans can be a tool to help work up and diagnose a problem, but it's only one part of your whole clinical picture, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. So just to go to the timeline, sorry, Molly.
Sorry.
So we they found the tumours underneath your tongue. You had the operation, to investigative operation it was then, because they realised they weren't able to operate and closed you up again. And just want to touch on that feeling. You said frustration, but how was that for you, waking up realising they weren't able to do anything?
Yeah, because I woke up in the hospital with drains out of my neck, similar to, it was a more advanced version of the neck dissection I had previously. So, you know, the recovery from the first neck dissection was like, gosh, this is hard, but beneficial. It's like I'm healing. The recovery from that neck dissection was just traumatic, because you just put your body through all this trauma that didn't help. And now you're spending 3 nights in the hospital healing with drains out of your neck, feeling shitty, and it's not even like fixing the problem. And then in the back of my head, I'm like, I have this cancer that's still sitting there and we're not doing anything about it, is how was my anxiety roller coaster that I was stuck on. Because then you have to wait 6 weeks until you can start radiation. So you have to let the tissue heal. And so that whole time I'm just in pain and mentally in just a bad spot for all the reasons. I was opening a business at the time of the recurrence, so I had to like shut all that down. I was dealing with the trauma, the surgery that wasn't helpful, and then trying to wrap my mind around, now I'm looking at 7 weeks of radiation and chemotherapy. And when it's primary radiation to treat the tumor versus adjunct radiation to clean up the margins, it's a higher dose. And I couldn't eat. I had to do a feeding tube. I couldn't, and that was from the surgery. So that was just not a great spot mentally to be in.
Yeah, no, totally get it. And I guess before the surgery, did they tell you that could happen, or was that a surprise? Yes. They did. Yeah.
They did. We had a very honest conversation about morbidity of the surgery and what the other treatment options were. And so how comfortable were we of how invasive is surgery going to be before we go, that the risk benefit's not worth it. And I love my surgeon, and I'm grateful for that. So I knew that was a possibility, but I think we were all really optimistic. The nerve involvement was surprising. They couldn't really tell from the scans how wrapped around the nerves the tumor was. Yeah.
And the pain after, was that like healing pain, or was there also some pushing from the tumor that was also causing pain?
Yeah, everything kind of swelled up, and so it caused a lot of TMJ pain, and I couldn't swallow because the nerves involved where you're swallowing nerves. And so that's why I got the feeding tube, because I couldn't eat, even though like everything, all the surgery was done in here, it affected the nerves to the tissues in your throat.
Yeah. Did you have a nasal feeding tube or one through the stomach?
No, I had a peg tube through the stomach because we knew we were going to do radiation. Yeah. So we just went ahead and put that in with my port at the same time. So
yeah, so you were set up for the long term.
Yeah.
Then we come to the next phase.
Yeah, so at that time we thought, well, this is metastatic disease, but it seems local, right? So it's stage 3. So we'll go ahead now and treat it with primary radiation. And I did 3 rounds of high dose cisplatin. And so got through that. And then I got COVID and was hospitalized for that while I had like 1 neutrophil from chemotherapy. So that was like a whole thing. And then I recovered. And I was recovering, and
How did you cope with radiation and chemo like that? Because you said earlier about not being able to eat, and
I couldn't eat. I couldn't talk. I mean, it was pretty standard what everyone else says. It was painful, but I hated the feeding tube, and I was like bound and determined to eat again. And luckily, I had little trauma to the inside of my mouth. And so once the radiation and chemo shrunk that tumor and this inflammation went down, I was able to regain like my speech and eating pretty well from like a dysphagia point of view. And I think that was helpful in my recovery. And I think I finished my last round of chemo was like the first week of January 2024. And then I went back to work April 1st. And I felt good. Like, I mean, I was ready. I was like done with being at home.
Because I remember that, because I remember we came to a couple of virtual meetups and I was like, oh, Molly, are you sure? And I was just so taken away by how quickly you recovered, and also how happy you looked within yourself, because that comes across as well. I was like, oh, she's doing all right. Like I was concerned. I was like, are you sure? Because I know you're ambitious. I know you're a pusher, but I was like, are you sure? And you're like, yeah, no, I'm okay, Barbara. I'm fine with this.
I was just because I think I felt that pressure of lists that can all be taken away so quickly, and I just wanted to get back to my life while I could. And like, yeah, there's side effects with radiation, and like, yeah, it sucks. Like, I'm not gonna pretend like it's not, but I'm here, and I have so much to live for, and that I want to do, and I'm not gonna just. I don't want to sit at home in pain and feel sorry for myself when I'm still here and I can do things. And so I was just really eager to just get back and do all the things I went back to the gym. I was lifting 3 to 5 times a week. I was back at work. We were traveling. I was gonna go to the Iditarod again. I had all that set up. Like, I mean, I was just I lost so much with radiation. I lost my business. I couldn't work. I couldn't travel. I couldn't, like, all the things I want to do, I couldn't do. So I'm very sympathetic to other people going through it, because that was devastating. And so I just but I used that's what motivated me to heal. Like,
totally.
I'll do it in pain. I don't care. I just want to like get back out there and like live my life. Yeah. And I'm grateful for that, because I only had about 10 months of that before I realized that like I wasn't ever going to be cured of the disease, and it had metastasized elsewhere. And so I'm glad I have the attitude that I have, because I have to continue that attitude now during treatment, or what's the point?
Absolutely.
You know?
So you were talking about those 10 months of, I guess, somewhat normality, but also, I guess, waiting to see what happened. How did you know that it was back? How did that unfold?
So I had pain in, like, it felt like after a really bad workout, when your muscles are kind of tight in like a day or two after you work out. That's how it felt in my trap, in like up in the back of my neck all the time, like constantly. And I had some pain here in my collarbone that was more of a sharp pain. And but that came late. Whoa! my cat decided to jump off my lap and pull my headphone out. So I had pain in the back of my neck, and I had some sharp pain in my collarbone, but that came later. So this muscle stiffness, it started maybe around May. So it was about like 6 months after treatment, May, June. And I, was continuing to follow up with my care team, and they were like, yep, that happens from radiation. You're gonna have pain in your neck. Sorry. Do some PT. And I said, absolutely, I'll do PT. And here's some stretches. Absolutely, I'll do the stretches. I'm nothing if not a good patient. You tell me to do something, I will do it.
And also, you are a good trainer, because you have looked after your body. How can I tell people about this? Molly has always impressed me by her lifting in the gym. You've always looked after your body, very disciplined. Yes. And when I asked you, how do you do it? And you just, Barbara, you need to embrace the burn. I was like, oh my God, okay. But you're nothing but dedicated to that.
Like, I'll do it. And so I was doing all the things. And then I follow up a couple months later. I'm like, yeah, this pain is still here. And also I'm fatigued. Like, I cannot get myself off the couch. And like, that's not me. And they were like, oh, that's just because your thyroid's low, which again is a common sequela of radiation treatment. And it was. And so we got me on levo tabs and like follow up a couple months. And I think we did a scan at that time too. And they said the scan was fine. And then a couple months later, we follow up, and I'm like, look, I've been doing the PT, I've been doing the exercise, I've been taking my thyroid, and this pain's like, it's not getting better. And they're like, I don't know what to tell you. You had radiation. Do you want some narcotics? I'm like, no, if this is my new normal, I don't want to be taking narcotics for it. Like, that's not sustainable. So I guess I'll just deal with it. And then I asked for another round of scan, because that's when the sharper pain in my chest and my collarbone started. And I remember sitting in that appointment, my radiation oncologist feeling, I was like, yeah, now I have this swelling here, like you can see it, it's swollen. Mm-hmm. And he felt it, and he's like, I don't know what that is, but I can guarantee you it's not cancer. I guarantee you. And he's a head and neck specialist, radiation oncologist at one of the premier cancer centers in America at KU Med. And he told me that. And well, so you feel reassured, like, this man saved my life. Like, if he's telling me that, okay, all right. And so you do the scan, you get the radiologist report on your app, on your MyChart app first. And the radiology report said, like, yep, everything's fine. And then I get a text message or the message from my doctor saying, like, yep, looks good. And I remember then thinking, really? Because, like, I can see this with my naked eye. So, like, it's just odd the radiologist didn't comment on it at all, mm-hmm. But okay. I had a follow-up with my surgeon, like, a week or two later. And so at that visit, I was like, hey, can we go through my scans? Because I haven't actually seen them yet. And, like, I read CTs at my job. So, like, I'm not a radiologist, but I've always liked looking at my scans because, like, I want my own opinion on what's going on. And so we're reading my scans together, and there's like a golf ball sized tumor at my sternal, like, clavicle joint. And I'm just like,
What's that?
Like, I knew what it was. So I pointed it out, and that's, I love my surgeon, and he knew that I knew immediately not only what it was, but what it meant, because it was in my bone at a distal site. So like I know immediately, like, oh, I'm stage 4 distal mets in bone. Like, I'm checking off about, like, I know what that means. And my poor husband's sitting there. He can read the room to know something's wrong, but he doesn't have all the, like, again, just like the worst possible way. Like, it just, so we immediately set up a biopsy and a PET scan, and the biopsy confirmed that it was squamous cell carcinoma, and then the PET scan showed that, yeah, it was in my bone, and then it wrapped around the back side of my sternum to my anterior aorta. And it's wrapped around my anterior aorta, which is awesome. And then it's metastasized to my mediastinal lymph nodes, my right axillary lymph nodes, and then potentially my liver. That's been inconclusive. It doesn't really matter. So I did call my radiation oncologist, because what it seems to have happened is the radiologist dismissed it in their report. I think they were looking here, and this was at the edge of the scan, and they dismissed it. And that it happens. It's wrong. We're all human, whatever. But that's why you have a team of doctors, and that's why the expectation is that your doctor that ordered the scan also looked at the scan, because they're the ones that have the clinical picture of the patient. He's the one that physically put his hands on it and told me it wasn't cancer. But I don't think he ever looked at the scan. I think he just looked at the report and just forwarded it on and just said, hey, looks good. And that's where I felt betrayed. So I did call him, and I told him that, and fired him and got a new radiation oncologist, and he's amazing. Same hospital, because I love the hospital, but different.
I think after an experience like that, having a change is a good idea, because I don't think you can go into an appointment with anger and mistrust or distrust.
That trust is broken, and I'm not saying he's a bad doctor, and he's not, like, I'm not going after his license or anything. I think he learned. I mean, I know he feels bad, but yeah, I can't have a relationship anymore.
No,
like that I needed.
And I think you're being incredibly gracious, because, you know, I'm sitting here. I remember when you wrote this all down and shared it in the group, and I remember I'm usually quite quick on replying, and I just remember having to sit down and process it, and I felt oh god, I said I wasn't going to get emotional, but I felt many different emotions in that moment, and I was
quite angry. I still am at the time, but I've had time to kind of work through it.
I think the thing that got me most is that I spend a lot of time talking about early diagnosis and highlighting to clinicians how young patients have to self-advocate so much to just get an initial diagnosis. And I thought that was it. I thought once you're in the system, then that's fine. And then I read your story, and obviously there's a personal connection as well, because we had so much in common, and like there's a whole load of emotions going on there. But I was like, I can't, pardon my language, but I was like, I can't fucking believe that we're at this point and we still need to advocate so heavily to be heard.
Part of the problem, because we even looked back at my other scan earlier in the year, and it was evident then. Like, in hindsight, you can see it then. And so that's why I bring that up, because it was there then. And I think the trap that I fell into was everyone talks about long-term side effects of radiation so much. And I think, and we're all aware that it can cause long-term pain and muscle tightness. Absolutely. But I can tell you that since I started treatment for my recurrence, I would say 80% of the pain that I was feeling has gone away. Like, it was from recurrence. It wasn't from radiation. And I don't know. And this is a question I have for my doctors, in that I want to talk about with you and the community is like, I don't know how we do better at screening, because I understand I have metastatic disease regardless. Like catching it sooner wouldn't have changed the degree of my mets, but I would have been in a lot less pain during the little bit of time that I have left to do the things that I love with the people that I love. And that's the part that's not fair. And I don't appreciate being dismissed because like, yep, that's radiation side effects. Well, but it wasn't. And so I don't know how we do a better job at screening for recurrence or metastatic disease from the sense of, I know from the physician's point of view, it's like, well, the course of disease was going to be the same regardless if we caught it in July or caught it in November. Yeah, I get that. But my experience as a patient would have been a lot less emotionally devastating to find out I had metastatic disease in the way that I did. And two, I would have been in a lot less pain. Like my quality of life would have been better. So like I understand it doesn't change the course of disease from a physician's point of view, but it does affect patient quality of life, which isn't that the most important thing.
Yeah, can I ask a really silly question? Because I don't have the clinical insight that probably you have as a vet more as well. But my sort of naive take was that if something spreads, even if it does spread, surely catching it as early as possible helps from spreading it even further. Or is it like, oh, once it's spread, it's always going to spread, but you can like slow it down? Or
so that was the question that I had too, and the response that I got and my understanding is it's not known for sure. So obviously the better you catch it in theory, the better the outcome. But if you really do have distant metastatic disease, and this is why they say it's not curable, is it's all seeded from that original tumor. So that's the and it's not proven, that's the theory, is that when I had my original itty bitty stage 1 tumor, it had already seeded everywhere. Yeah. And so that's why scans are controversial in screening for follow-up, because if it's already distant met, it's already distant met. And if you're finding it for every tissue you find it in, it's probably in 5 other tissues that you haven't found it yet. And that's why the goals shift from being curable to being controlled. And that's not to say that there aren't cases that have been distant met stage 4 that are deemed cancer-free, after 5 years of no disease growth. And in some cancers, that's more common than others. That's not typically the outcome for oral squamous cell carcinoma.
And that's the other thing, is that oral squamous carcinoma is unique, and not all cancers are the same, and they travel and behave in different ways. I was more thinking from a, curable, not curable is one thing, but also from a, like you said, a quality of life and a time perspective. If it helps, or actually if it doesn't. So if it's, if you,
then it becomes like this balancing act of like, you want to use drugs to stop cancer growth, but then those come with their own quality of life / just side effect issues. So then if you're not having clinical disease and metastatic cancer, like I didn't for 3 years, then like there's no, I don't know. It's a balance. It's a clinical art. Like medicine's an art. It's not a cookbook. Even though we try to put it that way, it's not. Which is why I think it's important to find doctors that you like.
Yeah, and I think I'm understanding it now as well, because even if they would have found it earlier, because you didn't have any symptoms, it wasn't affecting your life in a negative way. If they would have started feeding you loads of drugs over a longer prolonged time, those drugs have another impact on your body, so you might have actually been better off just waiting until it gets to that point. But okay, got it, right, Barbara's brain has gone click click click.
I know, well, it is, And when cancer spreads, it spreads locally first and then regionally and then it disseminates. So like that's where we get the idea that, you know, you catch it earlier at stage 2 versus stage 3. It's cured because it's still controlled regionally. You can treat it regionally. But the problem with cases like mine is that it was essentially an occult stage 4 from the very beginning. We didn't know the 14 lymph nodes that they took happened to be 14 clear ones, but it was in other ones. Those just weren't the ones that they took. And absolutely. It was in my tongue and it was in these other places. It just wasn't advanced enough to show up on the PET scans. And so that's where the whole perspective changes when you're stage 4. It's almost a totally different disease.
Yeah, no, but I am getting that picture, because also it's quite different. You know, we've not seen each other for a long time or caught up on a one-to-one basis, and I'm confronted with, you know, the majority of, well, the 99% of the group who are dealing with their first experience of tongue cancer, and thankfully there is recurrence, and we know we've got a negative bias in the group because the people that are fine, they leave, they go on, and they have a hopefully fantastic life. But in the grand scheme of things, recurrence is still relatively rare. But I'm also saying that knowing that you're sitting in front of me and you're the one with...
No, it's true. Like I was the 2% that based off of my initial stats, and it's hard, and it's hard because like you and presumably everyone in Young Tongues understands, like it's hard being diagnosed with a rare disease relative to your like age and lifestyle, and then it's even more isolating than being the unicorn of the unicorns in the sense, and then you try to find people to relate to, but then you scare them. So then it's also isolating because I know people like to pretend I don't exist because I'm like their worst fear, which is fine. I was also that person, so like I understand. But then being in like the Young Tongue Lifers group when there's only 15 of us compared to the 800 in Young Tongue also kind of hurts. Like that's also kind of isolating. Like, oh, here, like talk here because we don't want to scare anyone else. But it's like, but it's my story, and like I want to share it because when I'm not here, maybe there's someone else that will find my like legacy on the internet so they don't feel as isolated as I have. Like that's how I feel when I find posts from Rachel Morissette, like who also is from Kansas City, and we have a lot of the same doctors, and it's like her disease was different than mine but similar in some ways, but like the only thing I have of her is what she left online because she's not with us anymore. And so I think our stories are important to share too, because we might not be around very long to find that connection, but I would hope that there's a legacy that can give people comfort for years to come. But I don't want to not share just because it makes people uncomfortable. And I don't hear because it.
No, and I don't think that was ever the point of Young Tongues or the Lifers group. To be honest with you, the Lifers group came about because I was starting to get contacted by individuals, and this doesn't include you, who were telling me about their recurrence but not feeling comfortable putting it in the group because they were exactly scared of that. Yeah. And they were asking me if I could connect them with someone or not, but more often I would end up having a lot of one-to-one time with them, which is absolutely fine. But I also felt like I'm having these conversations, and this would be great if they met, talk together. So I set up the Lifers group, and there's 15, and I know that within the entire community of Young Tongues, there's a lot more people with a chronic, but maybe they've not heard about it or not seen it yet. But I also noticed, like in general, the patient group is so awesome. any offshoot that I've tried to create does not come anywhere near to that. So I'm almost a bit like, well, I'll leave it there. We'll see what happens to it.
And
Because the same goes.
It is nice to connect to other people. You can immediately find people that like you can connect to, and it is. I appreciate that.
Yeah. But yeah, at the same time, so I kind of just put it up there as an option, and then we'll see how it goes. But the other thing I was really conscious of, like, also for me, as a person who hasn't got this experience, but in the long term wants to create content, like for the website, that is helpful for someone who's newly diagnosed with chronic cancer, is like, who can I ask? And I can't go back in time. I can't go back to Rachel and ask her.
That's the weird part about it. And so that's why recently I wanted to share more on social media for exactly that reason. Because it's just a weird group of people to be in. But that's also what's cool about technology, though, is that you can kind of transcend time a little bit by leaving media behind.
Yeah, you're leaving the breadcrumbs behind for others to find. I am. Let's just catch those up that are wondering. You got the recurrence in the bone. What was the clinical process after that, and where are you finding yourself right now?
So then after that, I met with my doctors to talk about different options, from systemic therapy to more radiation. And the best possible outcome we could hope for, which is still on the table, but the door's closing on it, but is to start some sort of systemic treatment. We started initially with just immunotherapy with Keytruda. That didn't work. I didn't respond to it at all. So then we added in chemo. I'm doing Taxol with carboplatin every 3 weeks with Keytruda because why not? And the idea is hopefully that shrinks and kills enough of the systemic mets that then we can go in and primary radiate this bigger tumor on my sternum again to kill it. That would be if I'm gonna beat this, that would be the outcome. But we also discussed palliative radiation just to help treat the painful mets. But the problem is that you're only allowed to radiate tissue so much. And so if we spend our radiation on palliative therapy, you can't then spend it on curative proton therapy later. So we're trying to reserve radiation on the hope that we might be able to use it to cure regional disease at a later time. So right now we're doing the carboplatin, Taxol, and Keytruda every 3 weeks. And I was really reluctant to do chemo because I had such a hard time with it the first round. And I think that's the other thing that's important for me to share to other people that might be having to make that same decision, is that this is chemo light compared to what we went through with this cisplatin radiation. I'm not chemo's chemo, it sucks, but I'm still working, I'm still going to the gym, I'm still going sailing, I'm still traveling, I'm still able to have a normal life. I just know infusion week, I'm gonna feel kind of bad for days 3, 4, 5 afterwards, but it's worth it for everything else. So I don't want, if I was to give myself advice looking back, I wish I wasn't so hesitant to try chemo, because this is way better than the previous experience.
Yeah, and I've brought this up on previous episodes. I think it's really something to be said that chemo radiation is a really different experience to just having radiation or just having chemo, and then also the type of chemo, because again, chemo comes in many different colours, shall we call them? So having had one experience will maybe not equal what the next experience of it could be. But yeah, the cisplatin radiation mix just seems particularly challenging.
Brutal.
Let's call it challenging,
Yeah.
brutal.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, so that's where we are now clinically. I guess where, how do I ask this question, Molly? Where are you?
We're just going to keep doing
Where do you feel
until it's not working.
Yeah, I know, but I mean, like, where are you emotionally, I guess? Like, how...
Yeah, I mean, I was really devastated. So I found out around Christmas that I had distant Mets, and I was devastated for a long time. I mean, I was just making arrangements. It's the only thing I could like focus my head on, is just making arrangements for when I'm not here, because that was just my way of coping, I think. Once we started the chemo in March, because the Keytruda wasn't working, I started to feel better. My emotional attitude's gotten a lot better. I genuinely, like, I kind of feel like how I felt after completing radiation and chemo last year, in the sense that, well, all that matters is that I feel good today. So, like, what can I do today? With who do I want to do that with today? And like, that's all that matters. And so, and I have some peace of mind that I already made kind of all the arrangements logistically for like when I'm not here. So now I can just focus on enjoying being here. And I'm cool with like operating in that mind space. What becomes hard is when people want to make plans for the future, or there's milestones in the future. Like my sister, my little sister, I can't say that. There's milestones in the future that like I want to be here for, that it's hard putting things on the calendar because I just don't know. And like, that's when I get upset. But as long as I am able to kind of stay present in like today, then I'm fine.
Yeah. And that is something that I've noticed a lot, because there was a time early on where we had a bit of contact, and I just felt Molly just needs a bit of time. She just needs to sit with this. And I kind of just, you know, I didn't quite know what the right way is to react. And I just thought, you know, I just put it out there and I say, this is how I feel about it. I'm angry for you. I'm sad for you. I want to be here for you. I'm on the other side of the world. I have no idea what that means. But also, here are all the opportunities, and you don't need to take any of them. You can take them all, and you just let me know when that suits. And I think the thing that breaks my heart the most is the isolation. And I wish we could do more about it, because that was the whole reason we've set this up in the first place. And I just felt like I felt really powerless, and I hate that.
And I think that's how we all feel. And I appreciate. I mean, you're very thoughtful and mindful, and in how you communicate. And I appreciate the directness of, hey, I'm here and I see you, and but there's no like burden of like, well, I have to make sure like Barbara knows I'm not mad at her. Like I assume that you know that like, my anger at the world is not at Barbara.
No,
it is at this awful disease and how unfair and unlucky I've been. And I don't mean, so like, yeah, I think I know I come off, I don't mean to be like toxically positive about things now. I've just gotten to the point that it's just, I don't want to waste any energy being angry anymore. But I also needed to be angry for a while. Like I think that was an important part, because you're grieving, you're grieving the loss of this life that you thought that you were going to have, which I feel like we've been through with the initial diagnosis. And then, I mean, we all kind of know what that's like to just grieve that loss of expectation. And it doesn't matter how many recurrences you have, like you still have to agree what you thought was life was going to look like. And so yeah, so I'm not going to pretend like, oh, just don't be don't be angry. Like, no, I was angry for a long time. I still am, but like I'm just over sitting in it. I'm just
No,
impatient.
absolutely.
Like I just, yeah.
Absolutely get it. One thing that I'm really interested in, and I'm just conscious that we might have people listening who don't have tongue cancer, but that might be caring for someone with tongue cancer, or might have a friend who's got tongue cancer, and might be experiencing a recurrence, or maybe an employer, who knows. But from where you're sitting, your point of view, if you could give any advice to those of us that feel scared, who don't know how to contact, don't know how to reach out, who want to but just don't know how, what would your advice be?
I think my advice about reaching out would be like, don't let the feeling of like, is this weird, stop you from saying something. I think on both sides, both as the patient and as a friend, there's that feeling of, I don't want to say this, or I don't want to reach out because I don't want to make it weird, or I'm going to be embarrassed, or this has all been a lesson for me on how to ask for help, because it's really difficult for me, and no one's going to think less of you for asking for help, or for reaching out, or for being upset, for being emotional, or needing advice, or you just have to start the conversation, and it's going to be weird. So you just have to embrace the weird. And that's what I tell my friends and family and employer too, because everyone says the same thing. Like, I don't know what to say, and it's like, I know you don't know what to say. I don't know what to say either. Like, you just gotta embrace that it's gonna be weird, and don't let that stop you from having the conversation or saying what you want to say, or reaching out to that person on either side, both as the patient and as the friend, employer, family member. I think we hesitate, and that's the same thing as a patient advocating for yourself, right? Like, you don't want to be needy. You don't want to be that needy, whiny patient. Oh, I'm just going to tough it up. I don't want to like cause stress. And it's like, I don't know why we do that to ourselves. Like, just be weird and be needy, and like, it's so like, don't let that stop you from reaching out or advocating. That's, I think, the most important advice I could give.
And also, I guess there's a normality to your life now. So I assume you still want to go out for a coffee and hear all the gossip.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I think sometimes people are like, oh, I don't want to complain to Molly because like my problems are nothing because she has cancer, and I'm over here like, no, tell me all your problems, because I want to hear about anything other than my problems. And your problems are still valid. I tell that to my friends and family all the time. Sometimes they get a little apologetic initially, not so much anymore because it's like normal, but like they'll complain about something. They'll be like, I'm sorry, I shouldn't be complaining to you. Like, I know you're dealing with whatever. And I'm like, that doesn't mean that your problems are any less problematic like for you, that your experience is any less like, no, like, you don't have to have cancer in order to have problems. Like I understand, I'm still a human. Like, I get it. So yeah.
No, totally. I guess just to sort of round things off, I guess what are your hopes for the immediate future? And looking back, are there things that you're taking from this really crappy experience that you're actually somehow weirdly grateful for? Or
I'm grateful for, luckily I've always been the kind of person to like not have a bucket list, in the sense that if there's something that I want to do, I just do it. Like, I've always been that person since I was a little girl. So like, I'm very grateful for that, because everyone always kind of asks like, what's on your bucket list? I'm like, there's literally nothing in this life that I've wanted to do that I haven't done. Like if that, but what this experience has taught me, and where I think I've changed, is I can ask for help. I'm much more empathetic that we're not, you really can be victims of circumstance. Like I think I had it in my head that if I do all the right things and I say all the, I check all the right boxes, that like nothing bad will happen to me. Therefore, if something bad happened to this person, it's because like they made a bad decision. Like that was just a very immature view of the world. I mean, I was young. I was only 29 when I first got diagnosed, and I think I'm not ashamed to say it, but I've grown from that, of just being much more empathetic and understanding that you can do all the right things, and life can still knock you down. And so I think trying to be, and I'm not just talking about just because of cancer, there can be a lot of reasons why, and I'm a much more empathetic, understanding person. I really come from a place of empathy now when I hear about someone falling on hard times, and instead of asking, well, what did they do so I don't do that, that does not cross my mind. And I don't think people mean to do that maliciously, but they do. So yeah, learning how to ask for help and being much more empathetic are definitely two positive things that I wish I would have learned earlier in life, but I'm grateful to having had now.
Yeah. And I guess just to the final question, because I just thought of one and I thought, oh, this is great. We're talking about the time capsule and, what we're leaving behind. And I guess in that sort of sense, if someone's found this podcast who's newly been diagnosed with a chronic cancer and is finding themselves at the very beginning where you found yourself just months ago, what would you like to share with them? What would you like them to hear from you?
I want them to know that like there's still like good days. Like I really internalized it of like, oh, it's over, we're done. Like treatment for the rest of my life. Treatment sucked historically before. Like I have nothing else to look forward to. And again, I think that it's normal to feel that way. I'm not going to tell someone not to feel that way, because like that's normal. But also, there's still a lot of good days. Like I'm still continuing to like make really good memories and have really special experiences with friends. I still feel good. Like you don't have to feel miserable all the time. Like there's a lot of good drugs out there. Like just talk to your doctors and like, and it's not all bad. Like obviously it's not the outcome you wanted, but it doesn't mean that life is over. Like you can still, like Brad and I are going to QS next week for a week. Like there is something liberating about being able to just focus on you and your loved ones and how you want to spend your time, and like everything else just fades to the background.
Thank you, Molly. Thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for coming, sharing, and I really appreciate it. I'm sure the rest of the community appreciate it too.
I really appreciate it too, Barbara. I'm so grateful for your thoughtfulness and your patience and your follow-up and like your support, and you've been such a light through this whole, like flashback to like 5 years ago and like finding you on Instagram. Like it just meant so much to find someone like me, and like I'm just so grateful to have you as a friend. So thank you for letting me share my point of view.
Thank you. And I always remember like when you shared that you went to a Frank Turner gig, and I'm like, oh my god, they got Frank Turner in America. Of course they do. Molly's at Frank Turner. I was like bonded over that. And yeah. And also meeting you and Brad, and Nick meeting Brad as well in New York.
Yes.
And it was just such a beautiful, lovely day. And send Brad.
Fun day. We talk about it all the time. Yeah. And you and Nick and like and Brad and I, we still talk about like if we were closer, like we have so much shared interests in like music and food and beer and just
especially
like,
beer.
And, I was like. It's like we would be such, I mean, we are, but like we would have so much fun together all the time, and I'm just like so grateful that we were able to hang out with you guys on your honeymoon. Well, were you there for the sex museum after? I don't know. Yeah, you came to that, didn't you? I did. I didn't want to miss that.
Oh, God. Okay, so just for everyone listening, there was some sort of pop-up sex museum thing, and me and my husband, on our honeymoon, were in a bouncy castle made out of boobs. So there's an image for you to dine out on.
Yep. Yep.
And that's how you make memories. So there you go.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Oh,
thanks,
thank
Barbara.
you. Thank you so much, Molly. Thank you so much for this. And thank you for our listeners for listening in to another episode. We'll be back next week. Bye-bye.